There's a chimpanzee named Ayumu who can beat you at a memory game so badly it stops being funny. Numbers flash on a screen, 1 to 9, scattered in random spots. They vanish in about a fifth of a second, faster than you can blink. Then, Ayumu has to tap the empty squares in the right order, from memory. He gets around 8 out of 10 right. A room full of university students, tested the exact same way, gets about 4. You are watching a young animal do something your brain physically cannot keep up with. And that should bother you. Just a little. Because you were raised on a simple idea. Humans are the smartest thing alive, and everything else sits somewhere below us on a ladder. The trouble is, the more carefully scientists test that idea, the worse it holds up. That test happened at Kyoto University, run by a researcher named Inoue Matsuzawa, and it made headlines around the world back in 2007. Now, to be fair, there's a catch, and the honest version matters. Ayumu had practiced the task for years, and the students hadn't. Give humans enough training, and some of them can close the gap. So this isn't proof that chimps have better memories than people in general. But strip all of that away, and one fact still stands. A chimp can hold a snapshot of 9 numbers in its head from a flash lasting 210 milliseconds. Most humans simply cannot do that, trained or not. The ceiling is just higher than ours in that one narrow skill. And that's the first crack in the ladder. Because if a chimp can beat us at even one mental task, the whole idea of a single ranking, smartest down to dumbest, starts to wobble. So let's ask the real question. What does it actually mean for an animal to be smart? We tend to measure it by how much it acts like us. Can it use tools? Can it count? Does it recognize itself? For a long time, those were treated as human-only trophies. And one by one, animals have walked up and taken them. Start with a bird. Alex was an African gray parrot, and for 30 years he worked with a scientist named Irene Pepperberg. Alex didn't just mimic sounds the way parrots are supposed to. He labeled colors, shapes, materials, and numbers, and he used them correctly. Ask him how many green blocks were on a tray, and he would tell you. But the moment that really unsettled people came with the number 0. Show Alex 2 identical objects, ask him what's different between them, and he would say, none. He had worked out, on his own, how to talk about the absence of a quantity. A concept so slippery that human civilizations took thousands of years to invent a symbol for it. And here was a bird with a brain the size of a walnut, reaching for the same idea. Pepperberg is careful about this. She calls it a zero-like concept, not exactly the same as ours. But Alex kept showing that he understood nothing as an answer. And once, looking into a mirror, he asked what color he was. He was told gray. It was the first time an animal had ever asked a question about itself. Then there are the crows. In an Oxford lab in the early 2000s, a New Caledonian crow named Betty was handed a problem. A little bucket of food sat at the bottom of a vertical tube, out of reach, with a handle on top. The only tool nearby was a straight piece of wire. Betty picked up the wire, wedged one end, and bent it into a hook. Then she lifted the bucket right out. Nobody taught her that. She looked at a problem, understood that a straight wire wouldn't work, and built the tool she needed. Human children given a similar puzzle mostly can't solve it until they're close to 8 years old. Now, the honest footnote again. Scientists later found that these crows bend twigs in the wild, so hook-making isn't quite as out of nowhere as it first looked. But that almost makes it more impressive, not less. This is a bird whose whole species treats tool engineering as a normal part of being alive. Now, animals aren't supposed to have language. Sounds? Sure. Signals. A warning bark that means, roughly, danger. But not words. Kon Slobodchikov, a biologist at Northern Arizona University, spent about 40 years recording one of the least glamorous animals on the continent, the Gunnison's prairie dog, and found something that shouldn't be there. Their alarm calls aren't just generic panic. A call for a hawk sounds different from a call for a coyote, which sounds different from a call for a human. And it goes finer than that. Buried inside a single call, the sound seems to carry details about the intruder. Its size, its shape. In one experiment, people walked through a colony wearing different colored shirts, and the calls for a blue shirt and a yellow shirt came out measurably different. A rodent, describing the color of your clothes. Now, the honest line, because it matters. Nobody has yet proven that the other prairie dogs actually decode all of that and act on it. The call clearly carries the information. Whether the colony reads it like a sentence is still an open question. But even the possibility, a wild animal packing descriptions into a squeak, is enough to make you rethink what a warning even is. Some animals don't just solve the problem in front of them. They plan for problems that haven't happened yet. Western scrub jays hide food to eat later. thousands of little caches in a single season. And a scientist named Nicola Clayton showed that they remember 3 things about every one of them: what they buried, where they buried it, and when. That last part is the one that matters. A jay will dig up a fast-rotting worm before a nut, because it tracks how much time has passed and knows the worm won't keep. It's recalling a specific past event, which was supposed to be a uniquely human trick. And it gets stranger. Given the chance, a jay will stash extra food in a spot where it has learned that breakfast tends to be scarce, quietly preparing for a hungry morning that is still a full day away. A bird, thinking about tomorrow. And then, just when the pattern starts to feel familiar, it jumps somewhere it has no business being. A fish. The cleaner wrasse is a small reef fish that makes its living eating parasites off bigger fish. Researchers gave it the mirror test, the classic check for self-awareness. They put a mark on the fish in a spot it could only see in a reflection. The wrasse looked in the mirror, then swam down and scraped that exact spot against a rock, trying to remove a mark it could only have known about from its own reflection. Later, some of them even recognized themselves in a photograph. Let that sit for a second. Self-recognition was long treated as the summit of animal intelligence, something reserved for great apes, elephants, and dolphins. And here is a fish the length of your finger, with a brain smaller than a pea, quietly passing the same test. The scientists who ran it put it plainly: we may have to rethink where self-awareness even comes from. And then there's an animal so strange it barely fits the conversation at all: the octopus. If you wanted to find a mind that evolved completely separately from ours, this is it. Our last common ancestor was some kind of flattened worm crawling on the seafloor more than 500 million years ago. Whatever intelligence an octopus has, it built from scratch, on a completely different blueprint. And it is considerable. Octopuses open jars to get at the food inside. They solve mazes. They recognize specific humans and, apparently, hold grudges, squirting jets of water at keepers they've decided they don't like. In labs, they're famous for escaping, squeezing their boneless bodies through gaps the size of a coin, sometimes slipping out of the tank at night to raid a neighboring one, and sneaking back before morning. The strangest part is where the thinking happens. Most of an octopus's neurons aren't in its head. They're spread out along its arms. Each arm can taste, feel, and react partly on its own. Almost like 8 semi-independent minds attached to one animal. Its intelligence arranged in a way that has almost nothing to do with how ours works. A living reminder that a mind doesn't have to look anything like a brain to be one. And intelligence isn't only about puzzles and numbers. Elephants will stop at the bones of a dead relative and stand there, quiet, running their trunks over the skull, sometimes returning to the same place for years. Dolphins call each other by name, each one inventing its own signature whistle as a kind of personal label. Whatever is happening in those moments, it looks less like instinct running on rails and more like a life with an inside to it. And that may be the hardest kind of intelligence for us to measure, because it never shows up on a test. It shows up in grief and memory and knowing who you are among others. So, how smart are animals, really? The honest answer is that the question itself is a little broken. It assumes intelligence is one thing, a single number, with us at the top and everything else trailing behind. The evidence looks nothing like that. It looks more like a toolbox. A chimp has freakish visual memory. A parrot handles abstract concepts. A crow engineers. A jay travels back through its own memories and forward into tomorrow. A fish knows itself in a mirror. None of these animals is a worse version of a human. Each one is extraordinary at the exact things its life demands, and often helpless at things that would keep it alive somewhere else. There is no single ladder. There are hundreds of different kinds of minds, each one shaped by a different way of staying alive. Here's the part worth sitting with. For a century, almost every time we've built a test to prove that humans are uniquely clever, we've watched an animal walk up and pass it. Tool use? Gone. Counting? Gone. Planning? Self-recognition? Even a question about the self? All gone. We keep drawing the line, and something keeps stepping over it. Maybe the interesting question was never how smart animals are. Maybe it's why we've needed so badly to believe that they weren't. If you want to read the real studies behind any of this, they're all linked down in the description.